All right, Proverbs chapter 6. We're going to continue where we left off last week. In Proverbs 6, we covered verses 1 through 5 last week, and that covered one topic, the topic of, two topics actually, the topic of surety and the topic of striking hands, which is related in some ways. Usually if you become surety for somebody, you usually shake on that kind of a deal, but striking hands also implies that it's people making deals where their word is not enough, and so we talked about that last week. So this week, starting with verse 6, we're going to cover a completely different topic, and we're going to cover verses 6 through 11, Lord willing, tonight. So Proverbs chapter 6, we'll start with verse 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travelleth, and thy want as an armed man. So clearly this topic, or this section, verses 6 through 11, is talking about people who like to sleep, people that are lazy, what the Bible calls a sluggard. And so I don't think you'll find the word lazy anywhere in the Bible, but you'll find the sluggard quite often, and we're going to look at it and see where it shows up in other places in Proverbs. And one of the things that's important, people, when they have to borrow us because they don't have money. Now, sometimes people have a real important need, and people who don't want to borrow are forced to, or not forced to, but there's a strong pressure to do so, to get out of a certain bind. And let me tell you this, I preached on this a while back, or taught on, I forget which, but God is the author of liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So that teaches me that God really would rather we not borrow. In fact, when you look at back when He brought Israel out of Egypt, He said to them, ye shall lend but not borrow. God would rather we lend money. God would rather we work hard and be productive, to where when people need to borrow, they borrow from us, and we become the lenders. And and I'm talking about the heathens. But God's people ought to learn how to live so that they are productive and that they don't ever have to borrow. Now, with that said, we live in a society where we live in a credit or a debt-based society. So it's almost impossible to live without borrowing. I mean, it's almost impossible. It's very, very difficult to do. You have to have a stake, or you have to have some business already. I'll never forget, July 4th, 2007, I think it was, is when I got out of debt for the first time in years. And I've worked hard to stay out of debt. The bottom line of a good economy, a system of good economy, is everybody knows the value of their own labor. I talked about this quite often. What's lacking in America is we don't understand the value of labor and the value of things that have value. A lot of stuff that we buy is junk. I was showing my wife the other day, these are fairly new shoes, but the leather's already cracking and peeling. Why? Because it's cheap leather. It says leather uppers, and I thought I'd be getting a good pair of shoes, but apparently it's that material that they put leather on, or they shave it so thin that they shave the leather down so thin that the outer, hard stuff is very thin, and it cracks. And it's like, wow, I want to take them back. I don't think I have the receipt anymore, so I don't know if I can, but it's like, man, I paid $70 for shoes that are going to crack in just a few months. That's ridiculous. If they're that cheap, they were made cheap, they should only cost $10. Yeah. And I want my money back, or give me another pair, and I'll just keep bringing it back another pair until I've got my money's worth out of them. But anyway, the problem is we have lost sight of how to set value for things. A man's labor is worth something because he is expending his life. You only have so many hours to live, so many minutes to live. So when you spend your life on something, and by the way, you got to be careful in and you judge, you ask God for wisdom on how to spend your hours, your life. Because whatever you spend time on, you're giving your life for it. And so therefore, when a man makes something with his own hands, he determines the value. But everyone else may not agree with his determination, because someone say, well, I could have made that faster than you did. I just don't have time. So, but I don't want to pay that. So they have to bicker or dicker or whatever. Yeah, dicker is right. They dicker. So the guy's got to be willing to sell it for less and think, well, yeah, okay, maybe I could have done a better job and whatever. But it's the right of every seller or every creator, inventor to determine what he thinks his value is. And if it never sells because he thinks he's too highly of himself, well, then he needs to learn a lesson. Maybe he thinks too highly of himself. But in a free market society, the free markets will determine that. Free markets will help everybody understand what the value of each other is. Here's a guy who farms and brings forth bushels of corn or wheat or whatever. He works hard. Well, here's a guy who chops trees and lumber and stacks cordwood and so forth and splits wood, and he works hard too. They both work hard, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. And so they have to learn to respect each other's hard work and find a common medium or a common middle ground to where they're willing to trade. One guy's willing to trade his lumber to the farmer who needs lumber in exchange for the farmer's wheat or corn, which the lumberjack needs. And so they have to come with and so to make it easier, we came up with a system of a money system where people settle pretty much on what I call biblical money, which is gold and silver because of their intrinsic value. You can't melt them down and get something else. Silver will always be silver, gold will always be gold. And silver is less valuable because silver is, I think, softer, but it's also, it tarnishes. It's not as enduring as gold is, and maybe not quite as beautiful in the minds of some people. But anyway, so you have things of intrinsic value. So these are things that are important. That should be the undergirding of any economy of any nation. Is the gross, what we call the GDP, the gross domestic product, in fact, I really don't like gross domestic product of a nation. I think I don't think that should even be considered. I think it should be the gross domestic product of the people, individually, by business, by farm, by company, or whatever, because the government has no business collecting information about the business and the private affairs of all of its people. So there should be no such thing as gross domestic product of a nation, because no government has a right to require its people. A government that's operating under the principles of liberty should never require its people to turn in information about their business. That's private. You should be free to be secure in your papers and your effects and what's yours. But anyway, but nations will respond to other nations who have people that are industrious people and who make good products. Remember back in the 60s, everybody laughed and made fun of Japanese-made products. But not so much now, because boy, Japanese cars are sure better than American-made cars in many ways, and maybe always. I don't know. I've never bought a new car in my life, so I wouldn't know. But anyway, so the bottom line is how people work. If you don't farm, you don't get anything from the ground that you can eat. If you don't hunt, you don't get anything that roams the ground that you can eat. And hunting is work, farming is work. If you don't mine, you don't get anything that comes from the ground with which you can make things. If you don't chop trees, and that's hard work. Everything is hard work to get natural resources with which to make things, whether to eat or to build something or make clothing. Everything comes from someone who has to do hard work. So therefore, work is the most honorable thing a man can do. And so Solomon, in teaching his son, even though his son, whichever son this is, I'm assuming it's Rehoboam, is going to be the next king, he doesn't want his son to be lazy, not to be a sluggard. So he says to his son, or he says to the sluggard, and hoping his son will listen. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Now, I was going to do a study on the word sluggard, and I forgot to. So I'm going to stick with what it reminds me of, a garden slug, which just moves along ever so slowly. Like lazy people don't want to get with it. Oh, look, if you got something to do, well, let me show you a good verse. Here's a good verse you ought to memorize. Keep your place there, but turn to Ecclesiastes. Book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, this is the book after Proverbs, and verse 10 says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. Ecclesiastes is also written by Solomon. So here's more wisdom here in the next book. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work nor service, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. You see the link there? Labor is tied to your time of life. When you die and you go in the grave, you're not going to be able to work or do anything. There's no device or anything you can use. So when you're alive is when it matters. So while you're alive, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. Now, might is not the same thing as power. It's related. But might means any power that you might need to use to accomplish what you need to do. And so might is similar to, it's the degree of power that you may need to use. And so might has two meanings. That you might do something, which means you maybe do it. But whatever you do it with thy might. Might as a noun in that sense, in that definition, means the power that it takes to get a job done. So it doesn't mean if you're going to install a window, take that glass and throw it on the frame. No. You don't press it on there with all your power. No, but you do it with all your might, all the might that it takes, which includes the carefulness that you don't break something. So anyway, so whatsoever thy hand doeth, do it with all thy might. Do it with all the ability that is needed, all the skill, all the thinking. Make sure your corners line up, and whatever you do, make sure you do it to your best ability, because you want to turn out quality products. If you don't turn out quality products, people are not going to want your product, and guess what? When they don't want your product and your labor, how are you going to feed yourself? You see, so a lot of people, and it's sad to me that people will do work based on, you don't pay me much, you're not getting much. Man, I'll work for free and I'll do just as much quality work as if I'm paid $1,000 an hour. I believe in doing something quality because you're doing it, and when you do it, it's a testimony to you. See? It's not about how much you get paid an hour. That's all part of this debt system. We Christian people need to wake up and realize that we represent the Lord Jesus Christ. Was God sloppy when He created the world? No, He was not. Look at the detail. I think God wants us to do quality work that reflects us and shows good. When I did handyman work, I used to tell people that say, are you licensed or bonded or insured? I said, no, why would I be? That's what crooks do. I said, no, my work is my signature. I can give you references to people I've done stuff for. See, when I moved out here from Indiana, I had a side business building sheds and mowing grass. I kept my customer list. I called them after I sold my business to somebody, a couple young college students who ran in the ground and displeased all my customers. Anyway, but I called them back after a few months and said, hey, how's the guy doing? Oh, terrible. We wish you were back. See, I had a reputation. Why? Because I did quality work. I didn't worry about, oh man, if I take any longer, what I make by hour is going to go down. I kept track of it, yes, but only for reference. Only for reference, but not to determine what I'm going to do. I determined what I was going to do by what I saw was needed to be done. There's times I've done work for people where I underestimated what it would take, And I ended up working for $3 an hour as late as 13 years ago, when, I don't know, minimum wage was probably $5, $6 an hour back then maybe. But I ended up doing jobs where I scheduled, I estimated where I'd make about $10 or $15 an hour, depending on who I was charging. Some strangers, $15, I'd try to make $15 an hour by my estimate. But once I got to the job, I figured that out so I could give a quote. And if they agreed to it, then fine. But then I would work based on quality, what I wanted them to remember me by. And quite often, it would take more time, or I'd have to buy this or forget this tool, and I had more expense than I foresaw. But I didn't care. I didn't say, oh, I've got a cost overrun. Cost overruns are presented by people who are dishonest. Look, when you make an agreement, make an agreement. Now, if you can go to them and say, if they hear about it, there's nothing wrong with you tell them it, but don't demand. Don't say, hey, I understand, can you pay me more? No, and say, well, I guess I'm going to lose some money here. I'm not going to make near as much, but hey, a deal's a deal. So, and if they volunteer to give you more, well, then thank God for that. But you keep your word. Be willing to take a loss if you had to. The Bible says be willing. You should rather be defrauded than to cause a problem especially with a brother in Christ. But anyway, so we need to learn that everything in life comes from our labor. By the way, the Supreme Court made a decision years ago. I'm not going to quote exactly right because it's off the top of my head, but I have it. I've got it in my database of information on my computer. But the Supreme Court ruled that a man's labor is the foundation of all property. And I've taught this before, and so I'll illustrate it one more time. A man's labor is the foundation of all property rights. For example, God created the earth, right? And he gave Adam, he planted a garden, put Adam there. But then they got cast out. So guess what? Where'd they go? Some designated place God told them to go? No, they had the whole world to go to. The whole rest of the world. They weren't allowed back in the Garden of Eden. So, does that mean the whole world belonged to Adam and he owned it all and his kids would have to ask him permission for everything? No. Adam can only own what he can control and what he can use. So, what did he do? He remembered the garden God planted. I imagine, I'm just guessing, it only makes sense to me, nothing else would make sense. I imagine that Adam probably staked out a claim or some area, and he says, okay, I think I can handle a garden this big, and he started doing what he's always been doing, farming and gardening and so forth. And so he's not going to, till the whole world or the whole, Asia or Middle East or whatever. He's not going to do that. So he tilled what he could handle. He knew his limitations. He had kids. The kids grew up, and we know that Cain was a tiller of the ground. So Cain eventually went off and started his own area and built a city. So what did he do? He found some ground. He tilled that too. But at the same time, there's trees growing that had fruit on it. So here's the bottom line that illustrates labor. What you can control, if you can fence off some area and say and till that land, no one else has the right to come and eat from that land because you invested your labor, your time, your sweat, years of your life or months or weeks or whatever, days and hours of your life has been invested in that, and you alone have a right to benefit from your labor. Nobody else has a right to benefit from your labor, but they have the freedom and right to benefit from their own. So everybody's labor is the basis of property. Here's a tree. A man comes. He's out walking in the woods. There's a tree. Oh, wow, look at those apples. Before there's a Johnny Appleseed. Okay? And so he finds a tree with apples. And he's hungry. So what does he do? There's no one around. It's just a tree growing like all the other trees. Does he need to ask for anybody's permission to pick an apple? No. If there's no fencing, no signage or anything that indicates that someone has planted and nurtured that tree, obviously that God put it there. And God using the birds scattered seeds. And here this apple tree is growing. So does he have a right to pick a fruit and eat it if he's hungry? Yes, he does. Now, once he picks that fruit, does someone else have a right to come and take it out of his hand and say, no, I want that fruit? No, why? He's already expended labor to reach up and grasp and twist and pull that fruit off. And that labor, since that tree did not belong to anyone, now does he own the tree? No, he does not. Someone else can come along and say, oh, that looks good. I think I'll pick me one too. So only that apple that they pick becomes theirs. You see what I'm saying? Supreme Court had some sense way back then, and they understood that labor is the foundation of all property. Now, if a man, if he sees a tree that just has a little bit of fruit, says, wow, I bet this tree would produce better if someone would care for it. So he went and got some animal dung or buffalo chips or whatever, and he starts breaking them up and spreading them around and getting a stick and poking holes in the ground around it. And then he goes down the creek with a bucket or a hat or something, and he carries water up and he waters that tree. And if he does that every day, you know, he has a right to put some poles around that tree and fence off that tree. He says, I have labored to make this tree produce fruit, and therefore, you guys that want fruit, go find another tree and you make it grow good. But I have invested labor. This tree is now mine. He has every right to do that if it's not on someone else's property, claimed property already. So you see, labor is the basis, the foundation of all property. Same thing, a man can be wandering in the woods and see a crack in the rock and say, ooh, hey, that looks like quartz. Oh, wow. I heard that where there's quartz, there might be gold. So he pulls out his handy Geiger counter, pulls out his handy pickaxe, and he starts chopping away at that. And he's in the middle of nowhere. This is not modern days. We're going back in time, okay? Before land was claimed by all these different groups and governments and so forth, and the Pope and all that stuff. But anyway, so he starts digging around, and sure enough, he comes across some gold. Now, if he does the digging and he does the sorting, who has a right to that gold? Does anybody else have a right to say, oh, hey, nice digging, let me have some of that? No. What's he going to say? Go find your own quartz. Go dig your own hole. You see? Why? His labor made it his. So, now, by the same principle, people buy property, but we have a debt-based system. So they go in debt, they get a mortgage. You ever think about what a mortgage is? What's the root word of mortgage? It's actually, I can't say a root word, but it's a complex word. But, huh? Mort, yeah. What's the root word of mort in Latin or whatever our language came from? It means death. And what does gauge mean? I've heard it means grip. But anyway, so it means death grip. I just heard that about the gauge, but I know in Spanish, morir or muerte is death, and in Italian it's very similar. So I know that a mortgage is death something. Why? It's the death to liberty is what it is. Why? You are no longer free. You're a servant because you're borrowed from somebody. So what people should be able to do, and God's plan is great, where God brought the children of Israel into the promised land, and he had the land divided up according to the families and tribes. Tribes cover the big areas, and then within those tribes, the families in those tribes, they divide up the tribal lands amongst the families. So every family, head of household, had some land. And it was theirs forever. And that's what should have been done here in the United States. The people, the posterity of the people of the United States should have, when they claimed land, it's a little bit different because we're not the same. So it's not like God brought a certain group of people there. So it can't be exactly the same, but the principle is that people should be able to, the states, the federal government is not supposed to own any land except for post offices and dockyards and shipyards and ammunition dumps and military bases or whatever. The Constitution says, and the 10 square miles for Washington, D.C., the Constitution limits the land that federal government can have. And that land is ceded to them for those specific purposes, as the enumerated Constitution, by the states. So the states hold in trust, when you read the Northwest Ordinance, I think, it explains all this. The Northwest Ordinance explains that the land is held by the states in trust for the people. Or actually, the territory is held by the United States in trust until the people of a territory can get 60,000 people, and I don't know all, I think it's one of the prerequisites, 60,000 people and then some other things, and then they put together a constitution and apply or request from Congress to be admitted into the Union as a state. Anyway, so then the land supposed to pass from the federal government to the states to hold in trust for the people. But now in Arizona, the federal government claims to own much, probably most, I forget what the percentage is. At least a third? I thought it was more than that.
Indian reservations are...
Oh, yeah, okay. But some states, the federal government owns 70 and 80% of the land. Now they don't really, but they claim it. They had no authority to it. And I'm not going to get into all that. That's a whole other discussion. But anyway, the bottom line is land belongs to people. Because God, the Bible says, God has given the earth to the children of men. Not to governments, to the children of men. When men form governments, those governments can only hold in trust for the benefit of the people of the land. But the people, by their work ethic, that's why the Homestead Act was a great act. It's a biblical act. It's a godly thing where you can go and you homestead, make improvement to certain land that you can fence off and control and use for your cattle, for your farming, for whatever. Then after so much time, that land becomes yours. You have all rights, and you can pass it on to your heirs after that. And you don't lose the property. Now, governments, because they get out of control, they begin to tax the land in order to raise money, which means the land ceases to belong to the people because it's the governments that they can claim to tax it. They got whatever you have power to tax, you have power to control. So the government then controls the land, and we just become tenants paying rent every year. And that's unbiblical, it's unconstitutional, it's wrong. And American people need to stand up. We need to spread this teaching all over America and get our governments out of our pockets and off of our lands. State of it, you ever go to intersections by interstates or by the freeways and they'll have signs, no trespassing, state of Arizona property. Say, why? Well, it's a state project, and so they claim they own that land. So anyway, and I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm giving all this as a compendium or a compilation of things to let you understand the principle that labor is the foundation of all property. Now, with that in mind, since if you do not labor, you cannot produce from land or from animals, or you cannot produce from trees or anything what you might need. Okay, where does our clothing come from? How do we make clothes? Of course, nowadays we have all kinds of modern ways, but even if you wear polyester, your clothing comes from an oil field somewhere. Technically, I mean, what polyester is made from, is that right? From oil derivatives, okay? And but in the old days, clothing was made from either animal skins, furs, like John the Baptist wore clothes made of camel skins. Well, I bet that was rough. Let's see, clothing can be made from flax, very fibrous, from cotton, which you grow, silk, which comes from worms, spiders, and other things. So everything comes from things that God has made that we learn about, and we learn to work with and process and harness and make something out of it. So everything takes work. Food does not grow on Walmart shelves or Fry's shelves or Kroger shelves or any other store. Can't think of any other, Bashas' or whatever. It doesn't grow on their shelves, no. It grows somewhere, and somebody processes it, packages it, and sells it. Lots of middlemen. And because we buy so many packaged products, we've lost sight of the value of labor. Now we have a government telling us what our labor is worth and trying to make everybody who pays anybody in a business, you have to give them minimum wage. Well, what if the guy's a lazy bum? They're not worth it. Well, you can't fire him unless you have, it's hard to fire people nowadays without getting sued. Why? Because government is infringing on the rights of the people to determine their own labor and the value of their own labor and the value of their neighbor's labor as they see it. Free market is about gone. The free market that we do have is pretend free market. It's under the umbrella of regulations. And that's why people are getting frustrated. People have no desire to work. And that's why they watch the clock now. Why? Because they've determined they are more valuable than what the government says that they are. And there's this conflict. But they don't understand how to determine real value. So now with that in mind, since everything we get comes from our labor, let's read this again. Verse 6, go to the ant, thou sluggard. You guys that watch the clock and want to work, get a little bit as little work as you have to get the job done, instead of doing it with thy might. Go to the ant, consider her ways and be wise. So here's lesson number 1. If you want to learn how to be a good worker, go to an ant hill or a trail of ants and watch them. Sit down, if you like sitting down. Take advantage of this Bible command or whatever, though it doesn't say sit down, but go to the ant and consider her ways. Watch how they work. Get up early in the morning before ants show up and notice what time they show up. And then stay all day and observe them all day and watch what time they go to bed. That might be a good idea for you if you want to make something from natural resources to consider what your schedule should be like. People complain, oh, I hate these 12-hour days. Well, what else would you be doing? Well, I could go home and play sports. Oh, what sports? Well, it depends on it. Basketball, well, what do you do with the basketball? You bounce it. Your arm's working. You got to push it up in the air to get it to your lifting weights. Or you want to get off work and go to the fitness place and pump some iron. Hey, that's work. Why people want to stop working so they can work in a different way that's more fun? Well, it's because somewhere along the line you've been brainwashed about what fun is. Fun to me is taking something that God has made and making something out of it that's a value, that's got some ingeniousness to it, and someone says, hey, wow, that's good. Can I have one of those? Well, you can't have this one, but I'll make one for you. How much you want to give me? Oh, I don't know. What's it worth to you? Well, I think it's worth this much. Okay, good. I'll pay you that much. And we contract and we make an agreement, and then I make another one. That is more fun to me than sitting in front of a television or playing ball. And I used to love sports, but nowadays I would rather work. And I got to do a lot of office work. I'll tell you something real quick. I'd rather work than play. I haven't played basketball, but, well, I'm sorry, Brother Brower. You bought a nice new net and a basketball goal and everything. And we put it up there. I played it several times, but it's been probably a couple months since the last time I did. I get tired of playing by myself. And I love basketball. But it's not near as much fun as work. Because when you get done with the basketball, what can you say you accomplished? Well, I threw this little round thing full of air through a little iron thing and it had some rope hanging from it and swished it about 5 times out of about 10 tries or whatever. Whoop-de-doo, what's that accomplished? Anybody gonna go, wow, hey, oh, now we got supper. It doesn't produce supper unless you live in a convoluted society that pays people that play sports millions of dollars in order to entertain you. Now, but anyway, that's why I don't care about Super Bowl. I didn't even know until I couldn't have told you the day of Super Bowl who was playing unless I thought real hard. And I'd have to, like I knew because of the controversy, I knew the New England Patriots were playing, but I couldn't think of the other team for the life of me until one dawned on me, oh, I heard someone making fun of the Seahawks. Let's see, Seahawks, were they? Oh yeah, Seattle. It took work for me to figure out who was even playing in it. There was a day when I knew every team, every city. I knew many of the coaches. I knew most of the quarterbacks, and basketball I even knew better. I used to know all 5 starting players of at least half of the teams, maybe at the best, when I was most involved in it. And I used to know boxing. I used to know all the top 10 contenders in your top 4 or 5 weight classes. I used to know all that stuff. I don't care. I can't care any less than I care now, which is almost 0. Because I realized I woke up one day they're not producing anything. So all that labor, all that muscle, all that might is going to waste. And no wonder we got jobs going overseas. Businesses don't want to hire Americans. Why? They're spoiled. They want $10 an hour. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not getting into all the labor issues in our country, but the bottom line is we need to stop being sluggards. We need to wake up and start doing what we do with our might, not worrying about what someone pays us. The more we work hard, the more our people are going to value us, and the more your labor becomes a bargaining chip, even in this society. But so go to the ant and consider her ways, and be wise. Ants work. You ever watch an ant? They might find something that's, how is he going to pick up that big old pebble? He walks around it, tries this angle, tries that angle. He fails a lot, but finally he gets a grip. He can at least move it a little bit. He's got to let go, run around, rest his jaws maybe, but he'll move it again. I have washed ants, and I've washed and washed and washed. So guess what? I got to tell you something I did. I worked like an ant last night. I was up late, and I was excited about something because I just wrote that article, and I just knew I couldn't sleep. So about 3 or 4 in the morning, I came out, and looked down the sidewalk there, and I saw all that furniture we brought out. We got some new furniture, got a good deal. And so I had that furniture sitting out there. It had all that lumber out there. It was starting to look cluttered, and I thought, this is not the way I want our property to look. This is getting out of hand. And a lot of the lumber was given to us free. And so I thought, man, I can't. I had just mowed the strip of grass between there, but I had to mow around some of the lumber. The lumber that was by the corner there. So I thought, well, it's a nice night. It's perfect weather for, it's cool, but not cold. And so I just thought, I'm going to move all this stuff. I'm going to take it way out there on the flat ground out there and store it there. So I got me one of those platforms, and I tipped it up on end, and got around to the back side of it, the flat side, and I got it, and I dumped it on my back, and I walked across the yard out there to the dirt, set it down, twisted around, spun it down, and set it down. Well, actually, the first one I carried this way. That was really difficult. So the second one I did on my back. But anyway, so I carried about 5 or 6 of those. Took time, but I got noticing, putting it on your back, even though you bent over, it's pretty easy. You just balance it. It's like walking. What's so hard about walking? That's not hard work. And I carried all those out there, and then I carried there's several, 7 or 8, 10, I forget, I didn't count. Why? Counting doesn't matter to me. The thing is to get it out there. I didn't care how many it was. If it's 100, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have still done it until I was done. But anyway, so I carried it all out there, and I made a nice, neat stack, carried all the little 2x4s and some 2x6s, and I carried them out there until I had a nice, neat stack. You can go look at it afterwards if you want. The corners match up, and I got the smaller stuff centered with the big stuff. That's just the way I work. I didn't just throw it out there. I wanted it to be easy to see what size what is in case we need it for something. Anyway, so I did all that in the dark. In the night. Well, it wasn't all that dark, but I could see stars last night. Anyway, then the furniture. So I had to get the furniture. Oh, that couch. How was I going to do that couch? I didn't have any help. I didn't have anybody. Well, I thought about the ants. I'm sorry, I didn't. but I should have. Really, I didn't think about it. I just remember how in the past I always found a way. I don't have to pick it up. Oh, it's big enough. No, you don't have to pick it all up. I did, actually. I did pick it up, but when it got to getting it into, I decided to move it in one of these rooms over here in this other place. So I threw it on my back too, but had to really, because you really sink into it, I had to pull it way up high and bend way over to keep from the other end from dragging the ground. But I carried it around, and then I got to the doorway. Okay, how am I going to get this in the doorway? It's really tight. You got to do it at an angle. So I got me a piece of plastic. I had it standing on the end. I got me some plastic and put it on, because you're dragging on cement. I knew I'd have to drag it. I couldn't carry it. There's no room for me and the couch to go through there at the right angle. So I got plastic under it, and then I stood up and turned it the right angle, and I tipped it down because it's too high to go through the doorway. I tipped it down, and I had this long piece of plastic, so I had a piece of the plastic in my hand and gripped the couch and had it lean on me, and I just drug it inside. Down the hallway, stood up in the door, turned it, had to open a doorway so I could kick the back in that way, and then so I could tip it to clear the doorway to get in the room I was going to go into, because it's a narrow hallway with 2 doors here, and I want to go in one room. Anyway, I figured out a way, like the ant who worries over this little boulder, but he finds a way. Now, I wonder what I got paid for that. Nothing. I'll probably have to take it out when I decide to finish that room that needs some work. But at least my goal was to get it out of sight. See? And it took some work, and I didn't have any help. So what I do, I rely on the brain God gave me and the brawn that I have, little strength that I have, and I found a way when I couldn't just pick it up and hold it by one hand and stick it in there. I found a way. And that's been my theme when I was in college, going to Bible college. I became known for the guy to go to if people needed to move big, heavy stuff somewhere. Up, downstairs, I always was able to figure out a way to do it. And why? Because I learned at an early age, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. And your hands are controlled by your brain. So use your brain and your hands. Find a way to get it done. Where there is a will, you've heard that statement, there is a way. You may fail a lot of times. Thomas Edison failed what? 2,000, 3 times? I forget. I've heard different numbers. Thousands of times before he invented the incandescent light bulb. But he got it done. He knew it could be done. So go to the ant. Study how ants work. They work and work and work. They find a way. And they get it done. They work till bedtime. All right, verse 7. Here's something else about ants I know. Which having no guide, overseer, or ruler. I've seen ants, a trail of ants. I've never seen ants stationed every 6 or 12 inches, giving instructions. They don't need supervisors. Why? They all know what to do. They know what to do, and they all care. They're not arguing about, hey, you're doing it wrong. Hey, do it this way. No, they all use their brains, and they figure it out, and they work as a team. I've seen where one ant can't. He just cannot get by himself. But it doesn't mean he can't move that big old rock. It just means he's got to get somebody else. Hey, come here. Pretty soon you have 3 or 4 ants moving, and they move this big old rock. It is amazing. So we need to go to the ant. Don't say, oh, I can't do it. I tried. Well, try again. I like what someone said. Triumph or victory. Triumph is try with a big oomph after it. Some people try that, well, I try, and they just barely try, which leads to people say, don't try, just do it. Well, you can't not try. How can you not try? You just but triumph. Try with the oomph behind it, and you'll triumph. Find a way. All right? Man, I want to go to work after this. I'm getting motivated. But, okay, so having no guide, overseer, or ruler. I hate to use myself as an illustration so much, but I don't know, I can't use anybody else. But this also had a big impact on me. See, there's several things that motivated me when I was young. And this is what you need to do. Learn, find out what motivates you. If you can find out what motivates you, then you can remember those things, then you can motivate yourself. You don't need, if you have to be motivated by somebody else, then you're always a servant. But if you can become self-motivated and become a self-starter, then you can be your own boss. Even if you have a boss, it can be like this. I had a boss. I overheard. No, he told me. Let's see, did I overhear it? No, I didn't overhear it. But one day I saw my boss when I was in Bible college working on a work scholarship. I'd only been working, 2-3 weeks maybe. And I saw the dean of men come in and they're talking, and I noticed I was putting away, taking people's trays after lunch when they're done. They bring all their trays with all their garbage and leftover food and all that stuff, and forks and spoons and bowls and cups and half-drunk cups of Kool-Aid or whatever. And I'm going to take all that, have to sort everything and throw away the trash and then pass everything on through the scullery window to the dishwashers on the other side. And so I was trying to get fast and learn how to put stuff real fast and do it without looking, because I knew where everything was, and I was trying to get real fast at it. And I was working it, but I noticed during lull times, I noticed my boss and the dean of men were talking about it. They kept looking at me. So I thought, well, I better keep working, So, but anyway, later on, my boss told me, he said, yeah, the dean of men was watching. He thinks you're a good worker. You know what I told him? I said, no, what? He says, Yeah, that's one of my best workers because I don't need to supervise him. He supervises himself. My boss told me that. I never thought to think, I want to supervise myself. That thought never occurred to my mind. I just did what my hand found to do. I wanted to do the best of my ability. I didn't want students to have to wait and get complaining. Come on, and call me names. Come on, slowpoke. Nobody ever called me that because I was not a slowpoke. I was not a sluggard. And so I got a reputation as being a good, hard worker. Toward the dean of men noticed it. So at the end of that first year I was on work scholarship, my parents paid my tuition that 1 year, that one semester, that 1 year. But there's no promise. In fact, they didn't anymore. They just did that 1 year. And so that summer I went home and worked for a guy here, and I got a call from my boss in August. He said, hey, I talked to the president of the college. I told him what a good worker you are. I showed him your time cards. We were allowed, we had to work, we didn't have to pay room and board if we worked 20 hours. And they keep track of your hours from week to week. If you're behind, your name gets put on this. All the workers' names are on this big display in the hallway where everybody in the school can see if you're behind 2 or 3 hours. It shows your balance, your running balance. But if you're ahead, it shows that too. At the end of the school year, I was over 500 hours over. And that's after not even turning in the last 8 time cards and getting docked 20 hours for each of those. I was still 500 hours over. So anyway, so I had, meaning I worked, I just didn't turn in because I was so busy working, I didn't think about my time, didn't write it down. So, well, I don't want anybody to think I lied, so I just didn't turn it in. But I was so far ahead anyway, it didn't matter. So I worked so hard, my boss told me, he said, I talked to the president. I said, we don't want to lose this guy. He's a hard worker. So the president said, well, we'll have to do something special for him because, my boss said his parents aren't going to be able to pay his tuition next year, so he's going to have to get another job, which means we won't be able to have him on work scholarship. And he's so valuable to me. He's my right-hand man. And so the president, not wanting one of his right-hand men to lose his right-hand man, said, well, then we'll give a special deal. We'll tell him if he'll work 40 hours a week, which I was already doing 80, 90, 100 anyway. If he'll work 40 hours a week, he won't have to pay tuition. So that next year, so he called me and told me that. He said, hey, your whole school bill will be paid. You just have to work 40 hours a week. I thought, great. So now, you see what I'm saying? Hard work gets you places. You get a reputation, and people don't want to lose you. So, but anyway, all that to say, you don't need an overseer or a guide if you learn to live and work because you value your product, what you're doing. And you value the reputation. You value your reputation as a child of God. And you should never be Christians should never be the ones that have to have supervision. All right? Next thing, verse 8, she provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. Look, when it's harvest time or when it's planting time, that's when you plant. You don't plant when you feel like it. There's another place in Proverbs. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to show you some other things. Okay, let's go there now. Turn to Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 4. This goes real well with this verse. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 4. The Bible says in Proverbs 20, verse 4, the sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. So you can't plant seeds until you plow the ground from the last year's harvesting. You got to turn that soil. Let nitrogen and stuff get down in there, and then you got to break it up and disc it or whatever and till it, and then form your furrows and then plant seed. But the sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. Oh, it's too cold. Yeah, he likes the harvest, but he doesn't like the work that it takes to get to the harvest. A lot of guys, they like to get a paycheck, but they don't like showing up for work. They don't like doing the dirty work. Look, there's no such thing as dirty work. If it needs to be done, it's honorable. I never think of something as lesser work. Picking up trash, man, I pick up trash around here all the time. I pick up more trash here than anybody and have for years. No one's ever picked up more trash than me around here and probably never will, unless when I get old, my back won't bend over. Then I wonder who's going to do it. But anyway, but no, if it's not natural, it doesn't belong to the ground, I pick it up. I like picking up everything, and I'm very thorough when I do. Why? It's God's property. It's going to reflect on Him. If our property looks bad, it's trashy, it's going to reflect on Him. I don't want I don't want anything to reflect badly on God, so I pick up trash. It's an honorable thing. Cleaning toilets. That's an honorable thing. Why? Because another child of God might need to use it. Would you want, if we had kings and the prince came, would you want him to sit on a dirty toilet? No, you'd clean it. Well, hey, a child of God is a prince with God. A child of God is going to sit on that toilet. So we got to clean it good. That's the way I look at things, and that's the way we all ought to look at things. The sluggard will not plow by reason of cold. Therefore shall he beg in harvest and have nothing. If you don't plow when it's uncomfortable, you're not going to be able to harvest and be comfortable. You're going to starve. Another good one, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 4. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 4. The soul of the sluggard desireth. See, sluggards, lazy people, they desire things too. They want, oh boy, they sit on the couch. Oh boy, I'd like to have a hamburger. Oh, I'd love to have a pizza. Oh, I'd love to have this. But they don't understand what all it takes to make those things. They don't understand what it takes even to buy the prepackaged stuff. Sit at home and collect a welfare check maybe. When they don't need to, and others they're able to work. So the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing. But the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. By the way, it didn't say the body. So the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. A soul that's fat, which you cannot see, is not a harmful thing. It's good. It's got lots of stored up joy, gladness, gratitude, praise. See, the soul of the diligent, the person that's busy, who, remember what diligent means? If I can remember, let's see. Choose thoroughly. Yeah, took me a while. But the guy who chooses thoroughly, in other words, he sorts all his options out, and he decides it's worth it for me to put forth labor. The guy who chooses thoroughly, what can I do? Well, I've got a body. There's a need. I'm going to do that instead of sitting here and doing nothing. So the diligent shall be made fat. The soul of the diligent shall be made fat. All right, back to Proverbs chapter 6. Let's finish this out. We'll be done in a few minutes. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 10. I think we're ready for verse 10, right? No, verse 9. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? See, lazy people, sluggards, they like to sleep. Why? No pressures while you sleep. As soon as you wake up, oh man, oh boy, I have to clean my room, but I don't know where to start. I need to wash the dishes. Oh, there's so many. I don't feel like doing that much. It's going to take me too long, and I really don't have the time to do that right now. There's other things I want to do, so I'll do that later. He's always looking at things and finding excuses not to do it. And so he's tired of thinking all that, so he says, I'm going to go back to bed. That's just an awful way to live. It's just terrible, but believe it or not, there's people that live that way. And I feel sorry for them, sort of, but they get what they deserve what they get, or they get what they deserve. Anyway, so how long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep. That's the way a little more. 5 more minutes. Hit that snooze thing. And yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. See, they like comfort. See? So shall thy poverty. How? A little at a time. See, it's just like the sluggard wants a little more sleep. Poverty will come to you a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. You can get deeper and deeper in debt, little by little. All right? So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. And that I've talked about that before. Now, this is so important. Watch this. Turn to chapter 24. Chapter 24. So important. Solomon tells his son this twice. Almost exact words. This is funny. I love it. Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 34. Let's see, wait a minute, that's not right. 24. Oh, yeah, 33 and 34. Yeah. Oh, this is good. Look at verse 30. Yeah, this is good. I wanted to do this whole thing. I went by the field of the slothful. Slothful is another word for sluggard, lazy person. I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard. If you ever watch a sloth move, it's the animal world what a slug is to insect world. But anyway, I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. He doesn't understand where the value of labor. He doesn't understand where food and clothing comes from. I went by the field of the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. I got some structure in me that I don't want to be like that guy. I don't want my yard or my property to look like his. And so I looked and observed and I received instruction. Okay, this guy is not pulling weeds. This guy is not chopping down the weeds. He's not keeping up. When one rock falls out, he said, well, it's just one, it don't matter. And then pretty soon another one, pretty soon the wall's down. This is where we get some of these old wise sayings. A stitch in time saves 9. So when you get a little tear, if you don't fix it, pretty soon it's going to be a bigger tear, and then a bigger tear, and then pretty soon the garment's no good when you could have used that garment for years longer if you stitched it up in time. Take care of the little problems, you won't have big problems. Okay? So, I received instruction. Look at verse 33. He had a little sleep, had a little slumber, little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want, or thy needs, as an armed man, or your lack as an armed man. So, bottom line is we need to get back to where we, as God's people, learn the honor of labor and work. And quit worrying about the reward. The Bible says, and I should have looked this up to give you the reference, in all labor there is profit. In all labor. It didn't say in all labor there is pay, in all labor there is profit. All labor will profit you. Whatever you work at, if you work at it, it will profit you. It'll profit your soul, profit your mind, profit your body, and it may even profit your pocketbook. But there will be profit. There's no work. When I got done 4:30 in the morning, whatever, putting all that stuff, you know what my profit was? I felt good. I felt really good. I could hardly wait for my wife to wake up and say, go outside and come back, hey, wow, the sidewalk looks so much better. I did leave one chair because I didn't want to get it. It won't fit in the room. I mean, I could fit it, but I wanted one to leave out there to try to get someone to take it who might need a chair. But I'll get it put away too. I got rid of a bunch of lumber. I got rid of lumber that was there before we got all this other latest lumber. So I did like many months worth of work, but because I had the will to do so, and it was a perfect night for it. Anyway, so let's learn to work. Let's learn to learn the value of our labor, and get back to it. And by that's the way, this kind of teaching is what it's going to take to reverse the trend in our country of people succumbing to and putting up with a debt-based, credit-based society. I don't want credit unless it's by faith, where someone believes that I'll be good on something. But even then, I don't want to use credit as little as possible. Why? Because God's method is to work now and get your return afterwards. Your profit comes later. And that's the way it ought to be. You ought to be willing to work for nothing work just for the sake of work until you can get paid for it, until you get the benefit. Starting a business that way. You start a business, oh man, you don't all of a sudden start a business. All right, I got a bunch of products to sell. If you're going to make something, you got to put out the expense and the labor first, and then hope that somebody will value it like you're hoping for, and then when you buy one, it doesn't pay for all the ones you made, but it's a start. And if someone's happy and they tell somebody else, then you sell another one, and then another one. Pretty soon you sold enough to pay for all your materials, and you got more money. You can now go buy more materials, make some more, and you build your business. That's the way it ought to be. Or you plant more fields and produce more harvest, or buy more goats or whatever. All right, I hope this is helpful to you. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. It has the secrets to any society that wants to prosper. If we'll obey your words, we'll live and prosper. Help us, Lord, to use the strength and the minds you've given us and to put them to the best of our abilities, and to be diligent and to do whatsoever our hand finds to do with our might, even if it's typing on a keyboard. Help us do it with our might, all the ability that it might take to produce good results. And bless us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.